Join me for a really great interview today that will either help you get started on a low-carb, keto, carnivore diet, or if you're feeling stuck because you've been on one of those diets for a while and you don't know what to do, this interview will help. I'm Jen, I'm a doctor of physical therapy, and I've experienced radical healing on a carnivore diet, and I really hope this interview will help you do the same. My guest today is Dani Conway. You can find her on Instagram at Carnivore Keto Fitness. Her website is nutritionthenaturalway.com, and you can find out more about her there or even sign up to work with her. And I also have kind of an embarrassing story to tell you about her. I went to KetoCon a couple months ago, and Dani was the first kind of carnivore celebrity that I saw there. I was a little bit starstruck, and even though I was nervous, I introduced myself, and she was so gracious and kind to chat with me. Then I walked away and immediately posted all about it on my Instagram story. Watch this. You guys, I'm having a serious fangirl moment. I'm at KetoCon, and I just met Dani Conway, and she recognized me. I mean, yeah, she did. It was really awesome, and she's so beautiful and so sweet, and I just cannot wait to see what the rest of this weekend is going to be. Honestly, I was just ecstatic that she even knew I existed. But we did get to hang out a little at the conference, so now we actually know each other, and I'm so grateful to be joined by her today. Like I said, today our guest is Dani Conway. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks so much for having me, Jen. I'm excited to be here.
Of course. So Dani is a board-certified functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, a functional blood work specialist, and an equestrian athlete, wife, and mommy to 3 four-legged babies, which include a dog and 2 horses. She's been living a meat-based ketogenic or carnivore lifestyle for the last 16 years. That is a really cool bio. I have never said those words before, so I'm super excited.
Thanks so much.
So Dani, I know that you personally used to be a yo-yo dieter who struggled with weight yourself, but you've lost and kept off 65 pounds after 16 years of eating a meat-based diet. So my first question for you is, what do you say to people who say this kind of a lifestyle is not sustainable?
Well, I'm living proof that it is sustainable. So that's for sure. I think that it just takes some people it takes gradual changes. Other people, they can go cold turkey and just kind of dive into it. So I think it's important to, something I would say to someone is figure out what works best for you. Don't feel like you have to do it the way everyone else does it. And there's one size never fits all.
Yeah, give up the FOMO for sure. And how did you find your way down this path in the first place?
Kind of with blinders on, literally. I had obviously tried everything. I'd counted everything, points, calories, restricted, 1,200 calories, all of that stuff. I had done chicken, brown rice, and broccoli, otherwise known as the bro diet. That certainly didn't work. And just kind of, again, had tried everything, and low carb was introduced to me. This is back in 2006 to 7. So, I knew a little bit about Atkins, but there was at least I wasn't on social media at that point in time, if there was even social media in existence. And I did have a lot of cravings for steak and cheese and fatty foods. And so I just decided to start, eating those foods, and slowly got to the point of reducing carbohydrates. And it was kind of history after that.
Okay, so as you were making these changes that were pretty unheard of at that time, because again, social media was not really around, was there pushback from your friends, your family, your physician of like, you can't just eat meat and eggs and cheese? Are you crazy?
Yeah, so I think, it was very unpopular, and I don't even know at that point in time, like early on, that I shared it with a lot of people. I did have pushback from, family members and that kind of thing. And quite frankly, in the beginning, when I would go to events, I didn't even try to stick to the guidelines in social situations. Number one, because that was really early on and I wasn't ready to do that yet, just to be fully honest. And the second piece of it was the social anxiety and the having to explain myself to people and why I'm doing this. And there's no way you're going to eat those foods and lose weight, all that crazy stuff. So again, that was super early on. But, over time, I kind of progressed into, of course, eating that way publicly, so to speak.
Yeah. And then eventually you got so comfortable with it that you started basically doing this for a living and helping other people to change their lifestyle in a similar way. So how did you end up starting that?
So I got to a point where I felt like I couldn't be the only woman struggling with no answers, getting told my blood work was normal and still feeling like crap in a nutshell. I doctors didn't have any answers as far as weight loss went, nor did they have any answers as far as like blood work and stuff. I was young, I was in my 20s, and I wasn't willing to sort of continue on that way. And I figured if I was feeling that way at that point in time, there had to be other women out there that were kind of experiencing that same thing where they had done the yo-yo dieting. They had, counted all the things and listened to all the dieting recommendations that were supposed to work. And maybe they were still kind of up against it as far as like it not working.
Okay. I hear you so much with that. It feels like when we try these different diets that are recommended and even promoted by the medical field, that if we're not having success, then we're just doing something wrong. And
Exactly.
so then you just have this shame around it too. It's like we've got to end the cycle. I don't know how to do that besides doing what you're doing and showing people there's another way and kind of holding their hand through it, not just saying, well, sorry, I guess you're failing at it. Do better.
Right. Right. Exactly.
With your clients, what are some of the biggest limitations when it comes to achieving their weight and health goals that you've come across?
So I think that's sort of the two things that come to my mind as you ask the question. First is mindset for sure. So having the belief that they can actually lose the weight or get whatever goals that they're after, because of having such a long history, maybe of yo-yo dieting or, kind of gaining the weight back. And maybe there is a little bit of lack of belief that they can get the goals, they deserve the goals. We a lot of times when we have that history, we get stuck in the story and telling the story over and over again of nothing ever works. I've tried everything. That tape just continues to play and play over and over again. And I often say the body hears everything the mind says. And even though that sounds woo-woo, again, we have to have the mindset and the belief that this is going to be different. This is going to change, and be open to having that and being deserving of those results that they're after.
I love that so much. I totally relate to that. That was always the thought going through my head with any diet, specifically when it came to binge eating. And so when I started a carnivore diet for my psoriasis, and then 6 months later I hadn't binged, it was like miraculous. It was nothing I ever thought would help. But I guess I wasn't even focused on that. So I wasn't telling myself, well, this will never work. This will never stop you from binging. I was just hopeful for some other stuff. So
Right.
yeah, that's
And I mean, you have such an incredible story, but that kind of leads into the second point that I was going to say is that there are definitely, people out there that do need to kind of go a step further than just diet and kind of look at some of the underlying imbalances that might be causing the psoriasis, the skin issues, the gut issues, the hormone issues. So that's the other big, I would say, limiting factor that, some women do need to take into consideration is that, yes, there's so many people that have had tremendous results, we'll say just in air quotes, from changing their diet. And then there are individuals who have changed their diet and they're still struggling. And that's where, figuring out the real root cause and some of the underlying imbalances comes in.
interesting. So we're going to dig into a lot of that here in a moment. But first, I just want to know from your perspective, what is it about meat-based diets like a ketovore carnivore diet that creates healing and weight loss that people just don't seem to get on other lifestyles?
Yeah, how much time do we have to go to talk about that one question? No. I think that number one, the elimination diet piece of it. So removing a lot of the inflammatory foods, inflammatory oils, inflammatory fats, things of that nature. I think that in and of itself is a tremendous piece of it. And then the increase in protein and fat for various physiological reasons, from hormone balance benefits to appetite satiation to blood sugar regulation, just to name a few of the things that this way of eating can really target and help.
know that you do take a food first approach. And so I have some questions about that. Specifically, how do you know what foods someone should be eating?
I definitely believe that one size does not fit all. And that being said, many people who are coming to me are looking for a weight loss. They're looking for elimination of food cravings, sugar cravings, more energy, better sleep, better hormone balance, better digestion. And so with all of those symptoms being said, I definitely have seen a, low carb approach work for that. Now, once they are low carb, I do take a customized or a personalized approach with, low carb to carnivore. So kind of on the spectrum of low carb. So definitely removing all the inflammatory foods and then looking at the severity of the symptoms that they have, what type of symptoms they have going on, and then what they feel like is sustainable. And I take all of that into consideration, and we choose a starting point for them and then kind of go from there. So some people can come to me and say that they fully believe that carnivore is sustainable for them forever. And I say, great, let's do it. And others might say that they think they could do it for a period of time, but they would like to eventually have the freedom to add maybe some avocado or coconut or olives or pickles or some, very benign foods back in, just because they feel like that is sustainable for them. So I really kind of look at the individual person and kind of go from there with their starting point and then moving them towards their ending point rebalancing the body from the inside out in between.
That's good to know, because I think a lot of people maybe would benefit from something like a carnivore diet or ketovore, and it's just too intimidating to think about doing that forever. So to know that there is some wiggle room, that that it can be as strict as you're able to do it. Like right. I always say, the best exercise to do is the one you're going to do. I suppose the best diet you're going to do is the one you're going to stick to.
Exactly.
Now, how often do you find that just changing the foods is all that's needed for healing and or for weight loss?
So I would definitely say that I feel like after all these years, which is about 16 in practice, I would say 50 to 70% of people can definitely get relief, if not all the relief they need from just changing their diet. And then I would say anywhere from 30 to 50% might need more than that. And, that might sound high. I also feel like my take or my sort of opinion on this might be a little skewed, because my clients are the ones who usually need more than just a dietary changes. So I do have a handful of clients where I meet with them one time. I make some recommendations, some macro suggestions and adjustments, and they are on their merry way and they never need to talk to me again. And that's great. And then there's another percentage of people that, I work with them for a longer period of time to, really kind of figure out what's going on.
And those are the ones that sometimes the diet isn't enough with the
Correct.
deeper problems, probably.
Yes, exactly. They need blood work. They need testing, hormone, gut balancing, things of that nature.
Those are all things that you work on individuals to determine exactly what they might need, right?
Yeah. So really just from a root cause perspective and just a test, don't guess. So I don't really go based on symptoms. I mean, I allow their symptoms to kind of guide us to where we need to look. But two people can absolutely present with the same exact symptoms and their lab work can look completely different. And therefore their healing protocols would also be completely different.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like the objective data. I like to know why I'm doing something. And when I can stop, frankly, if I have to take some kind of supplement or something, I'm happy to do that. But like, I want there to be a plan of why I need it and when I don't need it anymore.
Yeah. And I love that you brought that up, because there's so much anti-supplementation, kind of negative talk about supplements. And the reality is that's why I have a food first approach. So food first always. And then supplements should always be used supplementally to whatever somebody is eating. Supplements are never going to help you fix a fast food diet. We all know that. But they should also be used for a period of time with a therapeutic plan in mind and an end goal to get to, so that they are helping direct the body as to where the body needs to go, and then they can support the body to be able to sort of pick up where they leave off once you actually stop the supplements.
I like it. I have one more personal question for you, and then we'll get into some kind of take-home information for the viewers that might really specifically help them. But my personal question is quite personal. It's about breast implants. I know that you had them at one point, and this is not something I've heard of even once in the carnivore community. So I'd love to hear your situation. What was going on that made you feel like you needed to have them removed, and what helpful information can you share about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the first question would be, what in the world, inspired me to actually get them? Because I feel like that is just so crazy when I think about it. So if anyone is wondering why I even got them in the first place, because I'm a health practitioner, and why would I get them if, all the ramifications that could be possible. So I share this part because I did not do the research that I should have done prior. And I sort of just buried I sort of knew about issues with breast plants, but I didn't want to believe it at that point in time. This is about 2012. So if someone is considering them, I always say, just do the research you don't want to do. I never want to tell someone what they should or shouldn't do. But again, be sure to do the research you don't want to do, and look at the things you don't want to look at before making the decision either way. So with that being said, I was kind of going through I'm going to be 40 in a few years, and maybe I wanted implants because they seem, boobs are fun until they're not fun anymore. And so I went ahead with it, and I actually started having some symptoms, some return of some gut symptoms that had been gone for many years, about 3 weeks after the surgery. I blamed the anesthesia. I found everything under the sun else that I could sort of blame for it. And, kind of fast forward a bit, thousands of dollars of acupuncture, functional medicine, things that I did before that worked that wasn't really working anymore. And of course, as a side note, this was like a kind of a shameful time, because here I was, a functional health practitioner trying to help other people heal from root cause issues and get healthy, yet I was dealing with my own sort of self-inflicted issues because I thought that I should get implants. So probably about 2018, I decided that I was done with all of the symptoms, and I really needed to look at getting them removed. And just, of course, I had the thought in my mind, well, what if I get them removed and all of this stuff doesn't go away? But of course, then what if I get them removed and all this stuff does go away? And yes, I did, finally explanted in 2021, early 2021. And probably within, days to weeks of having them removed, a lot of the things that I had been experiencing up until that time started to significantly and slowly decrease. And I still find today that, we're a couple years later, that I, think to myself, wow, every time I eat dinner, I never have a stomach ache anymore. I used to get sort of this upper GI kind of thing. And there's just, so I don't know if that's more or less information that you wanted. I'm happy to answer questions, but there's a lot of information out there about breast implant illness. I don't really consider myself like I wasn't ill necessarily. A lot of women get very, very sick and they literally cannot function. I call it breast implant toxicity because there was a lot of things that I still try to manage with supplements and acupuncture and all of that. And I was still having issues, but I was, very functional in my life. So just in general.
So if somebody has breast implants and they're not having severe illness, so they're not necessarily thinking about breast implant illness, are there sort of subtle signs that you've found in your own experience or that you've read about that maybe they could be on the lookout for?
I would watch things like thyroid antibodies, thyroid numbers, watch your gut issues or lack thereof, or maybe things kind of creep slowly. I would, look at things like, sleep patterns, insomnia, things like that. So things that might be subtle, could potentially be problems of the implants. That's not to say that, I'm not by any means making any claims. And every person is different. So for sure, there can be people out there that may never have any symptoms. Absolutely.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. My
Yeah.
last interview was with a man, and we got to talking about erectile dysfunction. So now we're getting all of it. The erectile dysfunction, the boob stuff. My channel is really taking a turn, and I'm here for it.
Well, I do want to show you something. So hold on, let me grab something. All right. So when the implants were removed from my body, they were fully intact. I didn't have any leakage. I didn't have any leakage issues. They were fully, intact. They did not have any leaks.
Oh my gosh.
They've been sitting in this bag for a while. There is the saline in this one is hard. You can see it. I actually haven't taken these out in about 6 months. So this is actually worse than they were before.
Wow.
Okay. That was the saline in that one. And this one, I have no idea because, like I said, the saline appeared intact in the implant. If I squeezed them when I first took them out, got them taken out, there was no leak. It wasn't squirting out anywhere. There's no liquid in the bag. But this is
so
insane.
strange.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
All right, now we're going to shift gears a little bit and get into a little bit of information that the viewers may find beneficial in their own situations.
Awesome.
So my first question is a little bit broad, but I know that you don't believe that everyone should be on the exact same diet. So do you have any tips for kind of how to determine how to tailor your diet in the beginning stages if you don't have help from somebody like you?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I think someone should determine if they are someone that would do better in a cold turkey type situation. So eliminating all of the sugar and carbs, like one day they're going for it. It might suck for a week or so and they're going to get past it. Or if they would do better on a gradual approach, like slowly removing the carbs, slowly removing the sugars, and kind of taking a few weeks to do that. I was a gradual person, honestly, and I was the gradual person even a few years into it as far as like, treats and things like that, like just to be full disclosure. And I feel like I couldn't have handled cold turkey back at that point in time. I did not have any external support. I didn't have communities. I didn't have a coach. Like I didn't have any of that. And so this is why I just suggest that people like be super real and not feel the pressure of what their whatever, whoever they're following is doing. Because really the best approach is what's going to work for you, regardless of whether, Joe Schmo influencer with 1 million followers tells you to go cold turkey. If gradual works better for you, then you should do what works better for you.
Sure.
And so that's kind of, I would say, step one. And then I would look at, what feels more sustainable at that point in time. Does it feel like you could start to eat all meat and be really happy and just kind of check it out and see how it goes? Or do you really feel like it's, where most of us are? I'm guessing, I'm sure you have some overseas followers, but I'm going to guess that majority of people, it's summer right now. We're in June as we're recording this. And so seasonally, some people might think to themselves, like, they eat salads in the summertime. Like that's a very common thing to want to eat some more of those type of veggies and cold salads and things like that in the summertime. So if you feel like your life would not be the same without a salad a couple times a week in the summertime, then maybe a ketovore approach to start out with, to kind of dip your toes in the water and get things going and see what type of improvements you get from that. And then kind of make that evaluation in a month, in 2 months kind of thing, and see what happens from there. So, I think that those things being said, if you start to notice that dairy is inflammatory, or you get runny noses, headaches, sinus congestion, constipation, bloating, gas, all the things we don't want to talk about. I call it poop talk. I talk about it all the time. That things like dairy or eggs are causing some of those things. even though they are quote unquote keto or carnivore foods, be honest with yourself. And, if you're going for the results, then removing those inflammatory foods, maybe for a short period of time, maybe for a longer period of time, your body will tell you, would be a good next step to consider as well.
I've found that when going on a diet like this, specifically a carnivore diet in my experience, that your body really does start to talk to you, which sounds a little woo-woo, like you said earlier, it sounds a little crazy, but it does. It tells you if you need more or less salt, if you need more or less fat, if dairy seems to be triggering. And so that was one of the best things I found from eating this way, was learning how to understand the cues that my body was giving. So if people don't understand that right now, of like, listen to your body, well, you might understand once you get going.
Yeah. And so if I could speak to that for a second, I think in the beginning, the waters are muddy, like what I like to say. So for me, when I was 65 pounds overweight on a fat-free diet, I craved a lot of ice cream. And I always used to say, like, there was no shortage of ice cream in my body, right? However, there was a shortage of fat and good protein. So the number one reason that we crave anything is when our macronutrients are imbalanced. So we're typically not getting enough protein and fat and too many carbs. And then from there, it can be gut issues, hormone issues, things like that. But again, is bumping up those proteins, those fats, and then kind of going from there as far as, making the adjustments and things like that.
Okay. Now, if someone's been doing keto carnivore for 6 months to a year, and they're doing everything right, they're not cheating, they're not, going off plan, and they're just not losing weight. What next steps would you recommend? And specifically, if they need to look at labs, is there a certain package of labs that you would recommend they have looked at?
So first and foremost, when someone says, oh, I've been doing this for a long period of time and I'm not losing weight, I want to see exactly what their version of keto and carnivore means. What does it mean for them? And so what I would recommend for someone to do is what I call reverse tracking. And I know there's lots of opinions on tracking out there, but I'm gonna give you what I would do in this scenario is basically track what you're eating after you eat it. So don't get involved in the macros and worry about the numbers or anything, but it's more about bringing an awareness to what you're actually consuming versus what you think you're consuming. Because most of the time there's a gap there that has to be bridged before, when to actually figure out what's actually happening. So by doing this reverse tracking, which basically means eat your meals based on your regular hunger patterns and pick a tracking app and enter the food in either after you eat the meal or at the end of the day. And do not worry about any of the macros, calories, energy, anything like that. And then maybe after about 5 to 7 days, you go back and you look at what those numbers looked like. And you kind of make a determination of like, okay, well, maybe I was eating too much fat, too much protein, or maybe I wasn't eating enough. So I see a lot of under eating. I think you've talked about this quite a bit. I see a lot of under eating with a lot of women, especially because of our dieting history, because we think that we have to eat less and weigh less. And that is not always true, or we're at least not eating enough to sustain our hormones and metabolism and all of that. So I'm not someone who, I just want to clarify, I'm not someone who believes that you should just eat pounds of meat and eat till you're stuffed. I don't believe in that approach. However, I do believe in becoming aware of what you're actually consuming and then making adjustments from there in terms of next steps with amounts of food that you're consuming.
So if they look at that and they see clearly they're eating too much or they're eating too little, then obviously they have a next step to make. But let's say that all still looks pretty normal. Are there particular labs that they should consider having done?
Yeah, so I would start with blood work. I would look at so when I run blood work, I run a fairly comprehensive blood panel. But just some basics that someone could look at would be their CBC with differentials, complete metabolic panel, A1C, fasting insulin. I would look at homocysteine and CRP. And those would be some that you could potentially request from your doctor. And hopefully, if you have a doctor who complies with that, you'll be able to look at some of those numbers and values and see where they are. And then, as far as like functional testing goes, I look at different, like urine testing for hormones, and I look at some different gut testing and different areas, kind of looking for some hidden imbalances. But I think that just starting with some basic blood work is a really good place to start.
I actually have a follower who asked me a very specific question yesterday. So I was like, wait, I'm about to interview Dani Conway. I'm going to ask her. So if it's all right with you, I'll basically give you kind of this case study of his question. Okay, so he is a 50-year-old man. He's been carnivore for about 1.5 years. He's 6'2", 260, and he started the carnivore diet at about 310. So he's lost 50 pounds. He lost all his weight really quickly and had some issues, like some thinning hair, some lack of energy, some changes with his voice, which is important because he's a singer. And that all resolved, but he's been plateaued with his weight for, gosh, probably a year. And he says he's, sticks to a carnivore diet, which to him includes meat and eggs. And I do know, I've kind of seen him, what he's doing. He does a lot of the trendy things. So like he'll do a fat fast for 5 days where he's only eating fat, or he'll do, I think he's probably done the sardine fast. He's tried really high fat. He's tried low fat. He's probably done, an egg fast. He's probably done protein sparing modified fasting. He's kind of done all the things because he's been so frustrated that his weight has stalled. And so he's open and considering to maybe doing some lab work, but he just doesn't even know where to start.
Okay, so I would start with, like I just said, the CBC with differentials, complete metabolic panel, fasting insulin if possible. Doctors sometimes won't run that unless there's a reason to, other than someone can't lose weight because they don't really determine that as a reason. And maybe an expanded thyroid with antibodies and kind of go from there. For a male, he might want to look at testosterone and free testosterone, as well as SHBG, sex hormone binding globulin. Because that, that can definitely affect men. It can affect women too. And that's kind of just in general, not knowing much else, kind of where I would start. I would also, for this person, I would go back to that reverse tracking strategy, and I would want to know exactly even with all the things that he's tried, I would know, like, what does your regular carnivore approach look like? What does it look like when all these things kind of shift? And then just kind of, maybe go from there with that data and make adjustments to, what he's doing.
Okay, great. And I don't know if he's exercising much. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on the role that fitness plays with all this?
Okay. And thank you for saying that, because that is definitely a big piece of it. Resistance training. I'm a huge believer in resistance training. I think that cardio can have its place for some people. But, also, like, how is he sleeping? That's a big piece of weight loss. Stress management, what's going on, in his life. Like, there's so many things to look at. But I believe that fitness is a huge piece of this whole puzzle. And, it's kind of like a movement. It's your circulation, it's your brain function. It's, it's a non-negotiable. Now, I think that based on whatever is happening with the person, their stress levels, their history, that all has to be tailored, their hormone levels, that all has to be tailored. But just in general, I think it's a huge piece of the puzzle.
Yes, I agree. I wish there was more of a focus on fitness in this community. I think there's a little bit, but diet is awesome, and it probably is the most important thing, but it's not the only thing, that's for sure.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest sort of complaints I've had over the years, especially when I first, got into the sort of keto space on social media, like 7, 8, 10 years ago or so, is that, and yes, I know that people can do this way of eating, referencing keto or carnivore, without exercise. But it was shocking to me how many people were like, I can just do this and not exercise and still, get healthy. And I'm like, there's just so much, muscle mass, metabolism, brain function, blood sugar dysregulation, insulin sensitivity. The list just goes on as far as the benefits.
Yes, preaching to the choir.
But yes, no, I know that.
If somebody wants to know their macros, that's a huge question people ask all the time. Do you have any general advice for that on maybe where to start and then how to tailor if needed?
Yeah, so I honestly I like to start around a 70-30 ratio. 70% fat, 30% protein, and then if they're keto, then the carb percentage is going to be, maybe like a 2 to 3% kind of thing. I know what traditional keto is, but I'm talking about like ketovore into carnivore basically. I don't think everyone needs to go to the 80-20 high fat version for results, and I see so many people who that ends up causing more problems than it actually, I see many people that have way more problems from 80-20 than actually helps them. So I think that 70-30 ratio is a good place to start. That kind of gives you an almost equal amount of grams of protein and grams of fat. Of course, eating enough is going to be important, but I think that's a good place to start. Did I say that 5 times already?
Hey, gotta repeat the important stuff.
And then kind of go from there. So look at hunger patterns, look at sleep patterns, look at energy, look at cognition, brain function versus brain fog kind of thing. And see where you are and then kind of go from there. There's lots of people that do better with more protein, a little more protein, and there's tons of people that do better with slightly more fat, but not having to go up to high fat that ends up causing digestive issues and things like that.
Do you think there's any value in regularly checking blood glucose and ketones in this situation?
I think that there definitely is. That being said, I don't think people need to check those numbers for success. So I guess I need to add all the disclaimers with this one. The reason I say that is because I did not check my own blood sugar or ketones until I think whenever the first Keto Mojo ever came out. So I went a lot of years without personally checking those numbers or having clients check those numbers. And I think for some people, they can be really helpful as far as kind of being data and guiding someone in a direction of this meal causes this response and that meal causes that response. And I also think that, especially as women, we can get a little bit hung up on numbers and a little bit hung up on data, and it can end up being just too much information and kind of cause a, cluster up in the mind. So I think it's valuable. I just don't think that anyone should get too wrapped up in any of that. And, unpopular opinion, ketosis does not guarantee weight loss or fat loss. So just because you have ketones in your body doesn't automatically mean you're going to lose weight. Not that it's not bad, not that it's not a great metabolic state, not that it's not super helpful, especially if you have medical reasons to be in ketosis. I just think there are so many factors, and we tend to, I see this a lot, starting to check those ketones and glucose, and they put all the eggs in that one basket, and it doesn't pan out the way someone wants it to. So
I agree with all of that. And I do like to track a lot of that stuff because I'm just such a nerd. I like to have the data. Sure. But the point of this lifestyle is that it can be so easy, yes, especially for someone who maybe had an eating disorder or something like that. And so if you're trying to figure out your total daily energy expenditure and you're testing glucose and ketones and you're trying to stay 80% fat and you're all the things, like it can just become so overwhelming. And so one of my favorite things about what you said about shooting for more of a 70-30 ratio of fat to protein is that you really hit that without trying too much if you're just eating animal foods. As long as you're not trying to prioritize the leanest ones, maybe you're adding a little bit of fat to your food, a couple tablespoons of butter or something, you're probably going to land somewhere in your 70-30. So you don't necessarily have to have all the pads and paper and the apps you don't have to do all of that, which is one of the beautiful things about this diet.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that for sure.
I've got one more question for you, and this is for the newbies. If someone is curious about trying keto or carnivore type of diet, and they just are like so overwhelmed, they don't even know where to start, how do you recommend that they just get started?
If that's the case, I would have them go with the gradual approach that we talked about earlier. So that to me is someone who might need to work on a little bit of mindset work. And just kind of slowly get themselves used to shifting over to this direction, because maybe they've heard mixed reviews, or maybe they still believe that cholesterol causes heart disease, or maybe they still kind of have someone in their life or some family members, telling them they should eat a different way. And so that's where I think the gradual changes and gradual approach, while they do their research and really kind of get the experiences themselves of removing some of those inflammatory foods, that's where I think that could be super helpful.
Yes. So figure out your why and do a little research.
Yeah.
Excellent. I love that advice. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this as much as I did. Dani is clearly just a wealth of knowledge, and we're so blessed to have her here. So if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe, and catch Dani and or I on Instagram, where we can connect even more. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and I'll do my best to field some of those. But if there's anything that Dani really needs to answer, I will compile them for her, send them over, and report back.
That'd be awesome.